All right. Well, folks, good afternoon. 2 minutes after 2 o'clock Eastern time, which puts us into our official first 2022 webinar presented by Orion Talent and a couple of our partners that you'll meet here in a moment. Thank you for everyone who's joining us today. We may have some folks, and it looks like we are having a few folks that are still going to continue joining over the next few minutes. But we welcome everybody and are so glad that you took some time out of your day and your week to be with us today. We'll be recording this session and then providing access to that link at a later date, so you'll be able to come back and view portions or all of the webinar at your leisure down the road. But thanks so much. This is our first ever Thought Leadership webinar of 2022. Not hard to top that since it's only the 20th day of the month, but we're glad you're here. And as you can tell by our title slide, we're going to be focusing today on unexpected advantages of veterans in the workplace. So thanks so much for your time. We appreciate you being here. As I mentioned, my name is David Coe, and I've been with Orion for almost 18 years, coming up on 18 years after leaving service on active duty in the U.S. Marine Corps. And I'm going to be the moderator of our presentation today. So thank you for being with us. What we're going to talk about today are a couple of different things that may not be first of mind when you think about hiring military veterans or veterans in the workplace. Really, we're talking specifically about the advantages that this provides those employers. And we all know that there are several typical advantages that folks will think of when we talk about recruiting or hiring from the military. You know, there's those intangible traits such as teamwork, communication skills, grit, loyalty, you name it. But what we're actually going to do as part of this session today is give you an opportunity to hear from professionals who have both transitioned out of the military and are now working in business, as well as talent acquisition and business leaders who recruit, employ, train, and promote veterans inside their organization. So it's kind of a great dual perspective on the topic as a whole. Both groups are going to be able to share with you some firsthand unexpected skills and advantages that they have found and come in contact with themselves. And also what we as employers and you in the workspace could consider and might want to think about as you're onboarding this type of candidate demographic into your overall talent strategy. So we're really excited about the topic. It's obviously close to home for me personally and for those of us at Orion, but there's something for everybody on our panel and hopefully for everybody in the audience. So we're excited to get things started. So let's first begin by letting me give you a little bit of background on each of our panelists today, because we've got a great group. Really excited, number one, to have one of my great colleagues, Christiana Casanave, who's an Army veteran and currently directs national recruiting programs and large-scale recruiting accounts here at Orion. Chris, we're so glad to have you here. Thanks for giving us some time. We are also blessed to have Christy Harper, who's the Director of Talent Acquisition at Lutron Electronics. Thank you, Christy, and glad you're here with us from snowy New Jersey today. We're also lucky on our panel to have Rich Williams. For those of you who may not know Rich is the VP of Special Operations at Lineage Logistics. Rich, great to see you again and glad that you're here. And then we're also joined by another colleague at Orion, Mike Wooster, who's a Navy veteran and also Vice President of Recruiting for the Eastern region of Orion, focused on our military talent practice. So Mike, great to see you and thanks for being with us today. So those are the quick intros to start us off. But don't worry, we're going to give each of these great folks a chance to talk in a lot of detail with you today. But before we jump into that, let's talk a little bit about the functionality of this webinar and how it works with us if you'd like to participate in some unique options that we have for you. So number one, we really like to have open and engaging dialogue on webinars. No one likes to show up for one of these presentations, sit in their office watching this for an hour and not having an opportunity to comment or get a question answered or anything along those lines. So we really encourage that. The first option you've got for that would be obviously drop something into the chat. You can see that probably up on the right side of your monitor. There's a couple different ways within the chat that you can direct the question to everybody, or if you have a question for a specific panelist, you're obviously able to do that as well. And additionally, we started with our Thought Leadership series about midway through calendar year 2021, also doing some interactive polls in the middle of these webinars. So we've got a couple of those coming up in the not too distant future during this time together today. And those are fun, right? Because they're interactive. We get to give you all a question in the audience, give you a chance to respond to that poll anonymously, and then we'll share the details with you. So Keep an eye out for that. When the polls pop up, we'll slow down a little bit and make sure everybody has a chance to work through it, and that the poll works for you and it functions the right way, and go from there. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the actual content. And we're going to begin today with a series of questions for the folks that are on our panel. Chris Casanave, first up, right? You're the first panelist I introduced today, and I want to go ahead and pose our first question, which everybody can see on the screen right now. This one's for you, Chris. When you think about your time in the Army, right? U.S. Army veteran, a couple tours overseas, a lot of great background experience. What were some of the skills that you were really surprised to see very applicable as you transition out of the active duty Army world and into corporate life? Let's start with you. Please share a little bit about your background, and then respond to that question however you see fit.
Sure, David. Thanks for letting me kick things off today. Before I do, I do want to say thanks to the other panelists, Christy, Mike, Rich. Very happy thanks for sharing this platform with me, and looking forward to the conversation today. My background, like David mentioned, I've been with Orion Talent now for almost 14 years. I'm a proud Army veteran. I'm the director of recruiting operations and talent programs here at Orion. And I work with our client companies to ensure that we're designing the right solution to support large scale enterprise hiring needs across the country with both military and industry experienced talent. So enjoy what I do, enjoy working with our clients, companies and candidates, and look forward to, again, this conversation today. As far as my military background, I'm a former Army Signal Corps officer. I was stationed just down the street here. I'm in Austin, Texas now. I was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas from 2004 to 2008. During my time in the military, I was deployed 27 months. I did a 12-month deployment and a 15-month deployment in both Baghdad and in Mosul, Iraq. My job at that time as a signal officer was basically to make sure we're supporting all of our soldiers out in the field with both satellite and radio communications throughout the theater of Iraq. So big responsibility there in supporting critical missions during wartime operations. So enjoyed my time in the service doing that. At the young age of 21, stepped into a platoon leader position right away, did that for about a year. And then I was a transmission engineer officer, and then eventually kind of transitioned into a night shift battle captain. In that role, I helped lead and manage what's called a NOC, which is a network operations center, very similar to, think about a data center in the civilian world. That's pretty much what we were kind of helping to run there. But that supported, again, the whole theater of Iraq in terms of communication support. So definitely learned a lot in both leadership and from a technical standpoint as well, and enjoyed my time quite a bit in the service. For me, one of the biggest lessons, David, I would say that I learned in the Army and have brought with me to the civilian world is that everybody is a leader in some way, right? It doesn't matter what level, what level in the military you are. You're trained that you're a leader outright, and whether that's a team leader of 2 or 3 other soldiers, you learn to take accountability and kind of have a specific lane that you are responsible for, and you take accountability for and become the subject matter expert in. I don't think people, sometimes outside of the military realize the level of independence you have to embrace very quickly. And again, often, at a young age in the service. I think people oftentimes may hear the term like chain of command. I know a lot of times in the military, we tend to say that, but I think there are some assumptions made that there are a few big leaders in the military, and then a lot of soldiers just following orders. There's actually a lot of leadership in between. And I think that's a good thing. I think, and you see it a little bit sometimes on military resumes when somebody has 4 or 5 years in and they say, hey, what's your skill set? And they have leader on there when they may have only, and Mike can probably attest to this as well. They may be a technician, electrician or electronics technician, but they'll almost always have leader on there or supervisor. And sometimes that I feel like that's where we come in as a consultant to kind of explain to our client companies that, hey, they're not looking for a leadership position. They understand where their skill set is at, but they are taught and trained to be leaders. And again, I think that's a good thing. Another thing I would say that I learned out of the service, and I learned this probably tenfold, is the creativity that you have to have. Again, I was deployed for quite some time out of my 4 years of active duty service, and in a challenging environment. And how creative you have to be out in the field is, unless you're in that environment, you don't know. And so, to give you an example, I would say learning to keep communication equipment and people cool in about 120-degree heat is challenging, but you learn how to do that, and you learn how to be creative. Just because the vocabulary, it can't be done, isn't something we can do. The mission has to take place and be successful. And I feel like that's something that transitions very well into the civilian workplace. So I know our civilian, companies, or the companies that we work with, they want to know that, we're going to get the job done. So I think hiring military is that mentality carries over very well. So David, I would say those are the big lessons I've learned during my time.
That was a phenomenal answer, Chris. Thanks so much for sharing all of that. I don't know if you could tell, if you can even see me, but I was taking some notes listening to you, because you kind of made me think of some things that I went through in my own experience on active duty in the Marine Corps, as well as what I've been doing in the in the business world since I got out. And so much of what you said, I think, resonates not only for anyone who's ever served, as well as those who haven't. And it comes down to empowerment, right? If we think about in our day-to-day, how many people in our organization right now can we look at and see who have tremendous potential? They're smart, they're creative, to Chris's point, they're hardworking, they're innovative. And for whatever reason, they might be in a job where their ability to use those skills and those traits is really limited by the role. The only thing I would share, as a so-called quote unquote Marine Corps story that might correlate a little bit to what Chris just shared, is that I had the same experience, Chris, you did. Of course I'm biased, right? Marine Corps, who's ever met a Marine that wasn't biased, right? We're supposed to be, I think, but that's part of the charm.
Yeah.
But, one of the things that we always try to do in the Marine Corps, because we never have enough people, we never have enough money, we never have enough equipment to still go accomplish missions that are assigned to us, is empower Marines down to the lowest level possible with information, with flexibility, and give them an opportunity to go help support the bigger mission. And really all of that is transferable into the business world. And I think, whether you spent 10 years or 10 minutes in a uniform or never served, it doesn't take much to look at that concept and just think about how it can be applied, within the workplace today, not just with veteran hires, but with any type of demographic of a candidate. So thanks so much for sharing that, Chris. That was awesome.
Yeah. Thanks.
Let's stay for a minute on the veteran side of our panel today with Mike Wooster. And, Mike, I'd love to hear your feedback, on basically the same question, right, from what we gave Chris, as far as skills and knowledge that you were surprised to see benefit you both on active duty in the Navy, as well as, in the business world. So please introduce yourself, Mike, and however you care to respond to that, we'd love to hear.
Sure, David. Thanks. Appreciate it. Chris, great answer to that last question. That was fantastic. So a little bit about myself. I'm a Navy veteran, as David said. I served 8 years in the Navy from 97 until 2005. Joined the Navy right out of high school. Didn't really anticipate re-enlisting. I thought I'd do one tour and get out. But I was deployed in the Persian Gulf on September 11, 2001, and decided right then and there that another tour was definitely justified and something that I wanted to be a part of. So I re-enlisted then and became an aviation electronics technician instructor. So went from hands-on technical work to teaching other people how to do what I had already done in the Navy. And to be honest, I loved every minute of my time in the service, and there's so much that I got from it. Narrowing it down to any one particular thing is very difficult. But one thing that I think is kind of unique that I hadn't really anticipated would be an advantage is the Navy did a great job of teaching us the history of the Navy, teaching us all of the things that the Navy had gone through, whether it be, wars, pandemics, whatever challenges that the country has gone through and the Navy has gone through for all the, 200 plus years that it has existed. they told you that history, they showed you that history, and they put a lot of effort into making you feel like you were part of something bigger than yourself. And there's a lot of advantages that come from that. I think you get commitment from the people that are in the service because of their knowledge of where that branch of military, whichever one you're in, had come from. But more than that, I think you also learn from the mistakes that have been made before. And I think that that's a skill that benefits everybody in corporate America. When a lot of times it's difficult to learn from other people's errors, to learn from other people's past and their history and things that they've done. The military does a great job of making everyone value that past experiences of other people, learn from other people's issues, other people's problems, and that way we're not duplicating the same things over and over again. So a skill that I took from the Navy that I think is highly valuable in corporate America is learning from other people's mistakes, learning from other people's experiences, and then also just having the commitment to knowing where your organization came from. So employers can learn from that by teaching their people the history of their company, where their companies come from, where they've gone, where they're going. Just invest that time in them, and then if you hire a veteran, you're going to get somebody that doesn't have to make all the mistakes for themselves. They can learn from somebody else. I think the military does a great job of instilling that in us.
Mike, thanks so much for that. That's a great thing to think about too. And I mean, I personally love that insight for a lot of reasons, but I think that it's so applicable to anyone, whether you've served in the military or not, having that task, that job, that mission in front of you, but then also having, maybe I would quantify what you just shared as both patience and perspective, right? To be able to pause for a minute, look back at not only where you've come from as an individual, but where your organization, your team, your company has come from, and making sure that you're applying lessons learned from the past and improving going forward. We can all do that. Every one of us is going to make mistakes between today and tomorrow. I've made 16 mistakes in the last 5 minutes trying to moderate this webinar. Hopefully I'll do better the next time around, but it's a great way to have some perspective and be mindful of that. And we can all apply that within the workspace. So thanks to both you and Chris very much for taking the time to respond to that question. So folks in the audience, I'm going to shift gears here a little bit and give our other two panelists an opportunity to kind of respond to some questions too. But I mentioned at the onset of this webinar that we started using some interactive polls within the last 6 months or so on these thought leadership events. And so we're going to jump into our first poll right now. I'll give you the question, and all you really need to do is just use the tools to the right to go ahead and answer. So here's our poll number one. When hiring from the military, what's the skill you most expect from a veteran candidate or from veteran candidates? So everybody, please take a minute. Feel free to go ahead and answer that poll, and then I think we're going to share the details. And for our marketing team helping lead this, interesting results. So we'll call out a couple things here. Looks like discipline is the most commonly anticipated trait or skill that they're going to expect to see from a veteran candidate when hired, followed by teamwork, followed by leadership. 0% chose creativity. Interesting. We must have some folks in the audience today who have hired a lot of Marines and soldiers. I'm just kidding. I can say that. So anyway, great poll though. Thanks so much, everybody. I'm not sure if we want to comment more on that, but we can always come back to it down the road. I really do, as I mentioned, though, want to shift gears here and let's go ahead and throw our other panelists on the grill for a little bit and give Christy and Rich an opportunity to weigh in on their experiences so far with the same topic. Similar question, Christy and Rich, for both of you, right? Coming from the corporate America side of this, you've both been able to share a little bit about your work and your experience in hiring military talent. Rich, hope you're ready. I want to start with you. When you think about your career and where you are today with Lineage Logistics, right? Even going back to, let's say, COVID, when COVID first erupted in March of 2020, Lineage is such a unique company because when many businesses were temporarily closing or trying to figure out how to stall things a little bit just because we didn't know what to do at that point, it was so uncertain. Lineage actually went the other way and put the pedal to the metal and had huge responsibilities because of your supply chain network, your cold food storage abilities, and everything related to that. So can you talk a little bit, Rich, just about your experience personally as a leader and within Lineage and any of the business you may want to mention? What skills throughout your time in hiring veterans have you been most surprised to find with your military hires?
Well, we've hired quite a few military personnel over various branches of service over the years. One of the things that I really like is the ability to, they train quickly. They're quick studies on a lot of topics, and I'll get into that a little bit. But basically, I really like the ability to diagnose issues pretty quickly and help take some mitigating steps to get rid of that situation. I feel like that's been one key that's really worked for me. The personable skill sets, sometimes you think of the military as really stoic type people, but I actually found it to be very opposite of that. Very talkative, very personable. We've hired, we hired a chief petty officer out of the Navy for a role that was a liaison with our drivers. And, truck drivers, we deal with thousands per day. And, he handled it lock, stock, and barrel, made everybody feel at ease. And, just that really personable skill set went a long way. We are an organization that relies a lot on continuous improvement. And my personal experience and my team's experience we are the kind of the boots on the ground when operations aren't running well, and we've got to make some quick hits. So I have a gentleman out of the Army that practically writes all of our SOPs and does all of our documentation for that was used to that role coming from the Army. He was a West Point grad, really sharp young guy. But he just took it and ran with it. And I haven't had to go back and critique anything or really go through. He learned how to do it quick, and he took a lot of pride in his work and just kind of went from there. We also deal with a lot of robotic cranes and automated systems. And we've had some really good hires that were former, Black Hawk helicopter mechanics, electricians in the Navy, and guys that worked on some pretty intricate electronics like Mike Wooster did. Very quick learners. They know how to read technical paperwork and blueprints. So those are things that really stick out for me that really helped our team and our company along the way, because we did flourish during COVID. I think we pretty much went 30% above our normal volume that we do for almost 2 years in a row. So we had to have people that could think on their feet, move, and had the discipline and desire to get it done.
That's terrific. Thanks so much, Rich. Great insights. And everything you just said is 100% true, especially around, your comments around both your Navy and Army hires and how their training from active duty prepared them to move into, a similar type capacity and role within Lineage, regardless of which branch of service we're talking about, or even the job families inside the different branches of the military. Training is everything. It's frankly all you do while you're on active duty is just rehearse, train, and practice, so that when that day comes that you've actually got to go operate real world, you're ready for it. So thank you for that great example. Christy, I want to give you a chance to kind of comment on the same exact question here, and certainly, everything that Rich just shared and we talked about and that we've all lived through in the last, almost 24 months, right? Since this thing called COVID showed up. Lutron, amazing company, certainly heading into what I would guess is probably going to be a pretty major year. I think I saw a data point from a Manpower Group study just this week that construction in the US alone is expected to be up about 41% this year, both for residential and commercial. And so doing what you do at Lutron, that has to be a big bellwether indicator for the kind of year that you all are going to have. Can you talk a little bit kind of along the same lines as Rich, as far as, over these years that you've been leading recruitment and talent acquisition at Lutron and had a lot of veteran hiring success, what skills have you seen transition really well within Lutron that maybe surprised you a little bit?
Well, David, thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here, to be on the panel with everybody else and share what we've learned over the years through our very active military hiring program. We hire military people into technical roles. I mean, we are a technical company with, focused on electronics and engineering. However, we do hire military into non-technical roles as well. We have had a lot of success hiring them into roles like operations and sales, and everything from enlisted service members up through officers and reservists, and up to even a full colonel one time. So, we have had lots of experience. We currently employ over 50 vets right now in our organization, and we generally hire somewhere between 15 to 20 a year. A lot of them go into our field services and our sales function, as well as into our engineering and operations functions. When we look at the military people that I bring in, and I get to talk, I have the pleasure of talking to many of them a year. I think the skill that has always surprised me the most is the leadership development, and how accelerated that is in a military setting versus a civilian setting or in a corporation. And when you're talking to a 24, 25-year-old that has been in the military for, anywhere from 4 to 6 years, and you talk to them about leadership, and they talk to you about leading, 100 people, it's sometimes amazing, because a 26-year-old that I hired out of college is probably not managing 100 people. But that flexibility, that ability to not be surprised by people, brings a calmness and an even-keeled approach to problems and unexpected challenges. Whether they're leading other people or not, it just brings a nice stability to the workplace and a can-do attitude to really focus on what's happening versus a lot of the noise around that can happen in a corporate setting.
It's a great point. And thanks so much for that, Christy. And obviously you're well qualified to make that comment and give that insight, just because of what Lutron has done and what you personally have done with Lutron Talent and your veteran hiring platform over the last few years. Let's jump in, on that note, straight into our second poll. And, we'll change the tone a little bit with this question, folks, for those of you in the audience, because we also want to look at the other side of military veterans as a job seeker. We've talked a lot about the great skills, traits, and types of, persona that they bring to the table. What's something that could be a habit that military job seekers might need to unlearn in order to have success in your workplace? This is something that any type of candidate or job seeker demographic, whether it's a college hire, an industry experienced job seeker, or even an internal promotion inside your company today, we all have things that we need to unlearn, right, in order to be more successful in our current workplace. But we're really interested in what the audience thinks might be some of the things that, veterans would want to unlearn a little bit out of this group. So take a minute on that. We'll see what our poll looks like. We should have had a drum roll on here. Orion folks, that would have spiced things up a little bit for the poll.
Create one on your desk over there, David.
I'm not good enough to do that, Chris. I can only do one thing at a time. I can do a bad drum roll, but then I can't talk. So 31% our highest ratio fearing failure, which is interesting. Also forgetting to focus on their career journey and waiting on the employer to guide them. I actually think that's a great one to call out, simply because so much of what folks on active duty and even in the reserves of the Guard go through is somewhat of a predetermined career path on a little bit of a ladder. It's almost cyclical based on time in service or the amount of time you've been a certain rank. So that's a great one to call out. So thanks to everybody for participating in that poll, and we appreciate those data points. So moving on, let's take a look at hurdles, right? Christy, I'm actually going to go right back to you on this one. I thought your response to the previous question, you and Rich both, was tremendous. But based on the level of experience you've had within Lutron with military talent, can you talk a little bit about some of these hurdles that you didn't necessarily expect to have happen as you were hiring veterans into Lutron?
I think overall, one of the biggest kind of recurring hurdles that we have, and it's regardless of what kind of position we're hiring into, is helping ex-military navigate the compensation and benefits of the civilian world versus what they're used to in the military. It is how they're structured, how they're provided is often very different, and they don't always have the opportunity to learn about it before they get an offer. Because oftentimes when we're participating in a wonderful event that you guys put on for these conferences, lots of times these military people haven't even actually left the military yet, and they're already trying to navigate offers to come work at companies that include benefits package and compensation. And how do you help a person who's been a leader of a platoon, or has a leadership role and has those responsibilities for a large number of people and are compensated accordingly within the military, but they really want to come to a sales role where they're going to be an individual contributor, and the compensation structure of those two activities is very different. And helping them navigate those changes, understand what those changes really mean to them and their families, is an important part of the process in hiring military people that you really need to be prepared for. Because if you're not, you're either going to miss a lot of great military talent because you're expecting them to navigate and understand all those implications themselves, or you're going to get caught off guard and not really be able to represent your company and how you compensate people appropriately for those people trying to make that transition. So I think bringing compassion and understanding to those conversations, while they might be tricky, is really important in order to be able to have a successful military program that is a very important part of your overall hiring strategy.
Christy, that's an awesome insight. And if not you, someone who's an HR or a TA professional on this webinar is going to steal that catchphrase, compassion to transitions, and throw it on a t-shirt or company team building event. So you need to trademark that bad boy as quick as you can here, but that's fantastic. And so important for both the employer and the job seeker. Rich, same question. Think about lineage and your professional and personal experience. What have some of the hurdles been that really stand out to you when hiring military veterans?
Well, I would agree with a lot of Christy's comments. What I've noticed is, with a lot of times, if we get somebody that's been in the military long and they're transitioning right from the military to civilian life, when they get in, some of them can be a little robotic at times, using the military jargons a little and being very hard charging. And how we've combated that is we've got enough veterans and hires from Orion that we kind of put them together. And if you don't put them together, believe me, they find out who they are really quick and they have their own little network, especially if they're coming from the Marines, I noticed. But, I say this, I would rather push somebody back than have to pull them forward. But a lot of times when you're dealing with the people under their charge in our company, whether they're operating forklifts, loading, unloading trucks, picking orders, doing more manual labor, you've got to kind of tailor down to that, right? Because those workers, they're not soldiers and sailors that had to be there. They can walk out and they can go get another job. So you got to tailor the discipline that you have and your attention to detail, and how do you help them get better at their jobs on a daily basis. But no real super hurdles beyond that, I would say. If anything, they're very open to training more so than people off the street. And I think Christy had said that too. Like, I've met a 23-year-old that was in charge of, some pretty hardcore military tactics and duties as a sniper. He's on my team now, and some of the things that he did a lot more than I did before I was 23. So you got to take that and focus it and get it molded in the right spot. And usually you do a lot better when you put them with a mentor, somebody that went through what they did recently.
That's great. Good insights there, Rich. Anything else you want to add on that before we move on?
No, nothing. I think we covered it.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much for that. Great insights from both Christy and Rich. Thanks to you both. We're getting ready, folks, just as a time check here. We've got about 22-ish minutes left in our webinar. And we do want to make sure that we leave some time for open Q&A toward the end of our session today. Megan Ralston from the Orion marketing team is going to help out with that. And we're getting a lot of great questions and comments in the chat. So thank you, Larry, Ashley, et cetera, for continuing to post those and share those. Before we jump into that open Q&A time, though, let's go back to Chris Casanave and Mike Wooster one more time with kind of we'll call it a hard-hitting question, right? Like we're doing a big expose here. Guys, think about this one, right? We've talked a lot about things that you brought with you from active duty that helped you succeed in the business world. Christy and Rich have been great about pointing out things that they were surprised to find in veteran candidates that helped them be successful, as well as things that Lutron and Lineage needed to do to kind of overcome some minor hurdles. What's something Chris and Mike, I'm going to start with you. We'll put you on the spot first because I think Chris went first the last time. Mike, what's something when you think back that you had to kind of unlearn, right, from your time in the Navy to help you be more successful once you got out and started working?
Sure, David. Yeah, that's a super difficult question, honestly, because I'd say 99% of everything I learned from the military was positive and has been an advantage in the civilian workforce, not a disadvantage or not something that it needed to be retrained on. So it's difficult. It's also difficult because the military isn't, one particular job. It's hundreds of different jobs in different environments. So my answer, I guess, would be very specific to what I did in the service and not necessarily relevant to everybody that served. But one thing I noticed, as I was in the military in a very regulated environment, working on a flight deck, airplanes are landing, airplanes are taking off, maintenance is going on. Everything on a Navy flight deck is heavy and hard and can kill you. So it's a very dynamic environment. The only soft thing on the flight deck is the people. So you come into a really regulated environment where you don't want creativity. Like in that first poll, one of the things that you don't expect to get from a veteran, and nobody said creativity was something that they expected. We don't, in that environment, you don't want somebody being creative. You want somebody following procedure, following the way things should be done, not deviating too much left or right from what they're supposed to do. Because if they do, there's drastic consequences. You come into the civilian workforce, and in particular, going from an aircraft carrier flight deck into a corporate environment, into an office environment, that's a very different world. And you can deviate left and right a lot more. You can be more creative. You can take different initiative. And so it took a little bit of time, I think, for me to come out of my shell and understand that it's okay to, not always have a procedure, not always follow a specific checklist or a specific guideline. I think the civilian world appreciates that a lot more, and the consequences aren't nearly as dire if you do, make a mistake. So that's something that I think I had to, somewhat unlearn. And what Rich said about having, a mentor, when you go in a company, if you want people to come out of their shell and do, understand the differences between the military environment and the civilian environment, the best way to do that is to buddy them up with somebody else that had been in the military that can kind of tell them about those differences between, what they've experienced in the military and what they're going to experience in corporate America or at that particular company. I think that mentorship thing is key to helping a veteran unlearn anything that might be a disadvantage for the corporate side.
That's great, Mike. Thanks so much for sharing that. And again, I think we heard another potential tagline T-shirt trademark there with the only soft thing on the flight deck is the people. But it's, that's true in so many facets of life and in business. And I think those are great insights too. Chris Casanave, Army, what did you have to unlearn from your illustrious U.S. Army career in order to be more successful working in the private sector?
You bet. I believe it or not, I'm in complete agreement with Mike's answer. I think he gave a great answer. When Mike and I were both deployed, lives depended on the success of the mission, right? So while I do feel like having experience working in a high stress environment, translates well into the civilian sector as well. It's definitely a little bit at a different level, right? It's good to know that you're not, operating in a life or death situation all of the time, and taking some time to decompress is okay. When you're in the middle of Baghdad, Iraq, that you don't really have that time. So I think adjusting to the environments, like Mike said, moving into an office setting. I think, Rich also mentioned, you get some very hard charging, individuals out of the service, which is a good thing. But it's okay to kind of dial back a little bit too. And all my time of working with military veterans over the past, 14 years, and also serving myself and my dad being prior service military as well, it is doable. I know there's the perception out there that, like Mike said, we're so strict in following procedures, and there are times that that's necessary. But we can be creative, but also just being able to switch mentalities, understanding what the environment is that you're working in a civilian, work setting. So that intensity is, essential in combat, but in the workplace, it can be a little too much. So I learned to kind of relax and enjoy my coworkers and just do the day-to-day business and make sure we're all, successful. I also love what Christy said about building veteran resource groups. That's something I feel like will be very helpful in getting veterans to acclimate into the new environment and bring down some of the intensity that sometimes can be a challenge. So I think I agree with all my panelists that military experience as a whole is mostly positive, but there are some things that eventually military veterans will unlearn, and having the resources to help them is the best way to go about it.
Thanks, Chris. Great response as always. And yeah, I would agree with you 100%, and Christy as well. Whether you call it an affinity group, an employee resource group, whatever the case may be, always great to provide those to folks. And, I mentioned something about this early in the call, that I think we could take the concept of this webinar today and the questions that we've asked, the polls that we've asked, and we can apply it to any demographic of job seeker, right? College hires, they're going to have things that they bring to the table to make them succeed, as well as things that they have to unlearn in order to be successful. And they too would benefit from some sort of a group, right, that's somewhat geared toward them and makes them feel at home, and that they've got some kindred spirits inside the organization. Industry experienced folks, I think, get overlooked all the time, right? Because they're industry experienced. They're supposed to know it all. We're expecting them to walk in the door and on day one, hit the ground running on all 8 cylinders and do magical things for us, and they should. But that doesn't mean that they wouldn't still benefit, right, from being given at least some of the same considerations as the others, and of course, internal promotions as well. So great input. We'll hit our key takeaways here really quick, and then that'll leave us, a few 10 to 15 minutes left or so for open question and answer dialogue, which we really wanted to plan for. The takeaways that you've got on the screen, I think, kind of hit everything that we covered today. But some of the other ones that I mentioned, and that Christy and Rich and Mike and Chris talked about throughout today's webinar, that I wanted to just kind of reconnect on, the empowerment concept, right? Giving both veteran job seekers as well as our existing internal employees the opportunity to do more, empowering to the lowest level possible. It's a key function of active duty military life that really is one of the secrets to the U.S. military success. Christy's compassionate transition comment, which I thought was so great. And Rich talked about empowering and also allowing for that transition with his Navy and Army veterans and their respective areas to shine inside lineage. Again, helping that service member have a transition into your organization, giving them a little bit of a compassion, even if it's unspoken, just to be able to do it in a way that works for both them and for you. Both in the Q&A and in the chat and in a couple of the individual comments here, I've heard a lot of things today about essentially allowing for freedom, allowing for mistakes to be made, encouraging creativity. Mike's example of how, he may have been Pablo Picasso, but his job on active duty on that flight deck, he couldn't go paint. He had to simply go do exactly what he had to go do, following that procedure to the law. He just needs an opportunity once he's out of that environment and working in the corporate world to really let his creativity flourish and flow. And then the ERG concept as well, right? Whether we're talking about veterans or any other demographic of new hires coming into your organization, making sure that they feel at home and that they've got an opportunity to connect with folks that have similar or like backgrounds. So hopefully that's helpful to everybody. So I think we're at the point here, we got about 10 minutes left where we want to transition into a little bit more open question and answer Q&A phase. Again, really appreciate all the comments and questions that have been dropped into the chat. And Megan Ralston, I want to go ahead and kind of turn the keys over to you and let you have the opportunity to drive the remainder of our session today. So Megan, I hope you're ready.
Yes, so we got a lot of great questions. Thank you everyone for submitting those. You can feel free to still submit them if you have some questions while we're talking. But the first one is, how often is it necessary for a hire to step down a notch in terms of responsibility and salary in their first role?
Do you want me to take that, David?
Go for it, Christy. All you.
I think it really depends on how directly translatable their skills are to the new career that they want to pursue. I think the other piece of it is the situation that military person is in when they transition out. So some of it has to do with deployment. There's extra pay if you're deployed and things like that, which not sometimes when you're talking to the military, they don't know their pay as well as you think they might. Lots of times their spouse, if their spouse is not deployed, handles like all the finances for the family. So being able to help them make the connection between what they will get paid and like where their finances are. I will tell you that I often talk to the spouse to help with that conversation, not necessarily the person that I'm actually giving the offer to. I mean, I don't go right to the spouse, but I will ask them, is there a person that I can talk to that would help, make it clearer for you? And I will often have that conversation with the spouse that has been handling the finances. The other thing is with the direct skills, when we're hiring an electronics technician and they have an electronics technician in the military, then the salaries become much more comparable. But if they're a major in the military and they're leading, hundreds of people on classified missions, and they want to come be an outside salesperson, then generally there is going to be a disconnect there because they have to start at a level where they can actually learn those individual skills of how to be an outside salesperson before they can grow those greater kind of people leading responsibilities, because it would be difficult for them to lead in a function where they don't know what they would be teaching other people. So it really depends on how much of a change they want to make in what they're pursuing from the military to the corporate world.
Yeah, I would add to that also, it depends on where they're transitioning from. I've noticed if they're retiring because they did their 20 or 20 plus years, sometimes the salary is not a big factor because they got their pension, their medical benefits. So some people, they're looking for the fit and for a certain area of the country. If you have, multiple locations spread throughout the United States, some people are definitely, they might have been in Marines out in California, but they're looking to, move back to Rhode Island. So, you could work that magic too for them and put people in a good spot.
That's a great point, Richard, is that there's a lot, when we're making offers, it's a lot about finding the right fit for what this person wants to transition their life into,
Yes.
not just what they want to transition their job into.
Yeah, David, and if I can add to that real quick, for the past 14 years of doing this, this has actually been probably the favorite part of my job, is being the consultant to the company and the candidate, because it really comes down to perspective, right? Sometimes the military candidate just may not know what they don't know yet, so they need somebody to, and likewise with the company. So I think having someone to bridge the gap. I know Christy mentioned, working with spouses that may have been handling the finances. I think it's finding someone, whether it's a consultant like Orion or, a family member that can help bridge that gap to make sure, okay, we're in alignment on pay and job scope and title, because sometimes those things just don't directly correlate, right, with what they've been doing out of the military. And they may think it's a step down, but it's actually not. It's a step up. And when you look, 5-10 years down the road, they would progress actually a lot faster in that civilian job than they would in the military in terms of pay specifically. So, and sometimes you have to teach them that you have to take a step back in pay in order to go forward. Again, faster than you typically would in the military, specifically in terms of pay. So it's just having that conversation and keeping the communication lines open and kind of bridging the gap and making sure everybody understands the reality when it comes to those things such as pay, title, and job scope.
And I think Christy made a great point in the sense that a lot of times the veteran doesn't know what they don't know, that the communication and talking to them, for instance, just something as simple as how overtime might work on a position, that could be it might appear to be less of a job than what they had in the military as far as pay goes. But when you factor in things that you don't get in the military, it could be significantly better than what they're seeing, and they're just not used to looking at it from that perspective because they're in a salary role in the military. There is no overtime. So I think having somebody in that onboarding process that communicates well with the applicant, with the veteran, can really go a long way to bridging that gap, even if it is a step back. So yeah, all great points though.
And even in understanding the job, right, Mike? I know you and I work a lot of let's call it tagged as high travel field service jobs, right? A lot of military technicians specifically fit well into those positions, but we have to learn to define what high travel is. Even for a military person, that's, am I gone for 9 months? Am I gone for 12 months? When it's, I may be gone 3 days out of the week, Monday through Friday. So really defining those type of things in the job description and making sure you're having those conversations with the candidate and they really understand, what high travel means in the civilian world, I think goes a long way.
Or even what does travel mean, period? Because, there's a big difference between traveling on an aircraft carrier, on a submarine, or staying in a hotel and eating dinner at a restaurant. Like everything is different between civilian and military. So just having those open conversations, I think, goes a long way.
Are those really different, Mike?
Sounds they like are so different.
Same exact. You must stay at a different level of hotel than I do. So about 5 minutes to go here, Megan, and we have the wonderful problem of probably having received more questions or comments than we have time to respond to. I'll kind of defer to you, Megan. What do you want to do? Do we want to pick your personal favorite question and give the team a chance to answer that? Or would you like to just kind of open it up to our panelists to give them an opportunity to talk to, kind of a parting comment?
I think we'll go with the next question because a couple of people asked similar questions, and I did drop the panelists' LinkedIn handles into the chat so that people can certainly follow up with them afterwards if they have specific questions for anyone who's been on and has said something so far that they want to follow up with. So the one question is, within my organization, we have been thinking about starting up an ERG for veterans. You mentioned this a few times as a great thing to have. Can you share specific best practices of what's needed to be successful or ideas to get started? And then there was another related question, so maybe we can address that at the same time. So the next one was, our company just launched a military/veterans employee resource group in October. What do you find to be the best way to engage not only the military members, but also allies to get involved and connected?
Yeah, great questions. And we're happy to respond to that. And folks, for those of you that actually asked those questions, as Megan just shared, if you scroll up in the chat, the LinkedIn profile of all 4 of our panelists, as well as me, is included in there. I know any one of us will be glad to connect with anybody that's an attendee today. I personally have had good fortune to be a part of a lot of ERG and affinity group startups specific to veterans. So I'm happy to tackle or talk through anything like that offline. If anybody wants to connect, I'll be more than happy to catch up with you. Christy, do you want to take that one? Because you actually mentioned it during your response to one of our questions in the midst of the webinar.
Yeah, I do want to clarify that we have a lot of veterans, and our founder was a veteran. So we don't have specifically ERG groups. What we use, and this is something that we actually employ across all of our different employment programs, like our college hiring program, is we actually have a formal buddy and mentorship system. So instead of having an ERG specifically, what we do, we create a more kind of personal connection throughout the organization by establishing a buddy and a mentor for every new hire. So a buddy would be somebody who would be closer to having just gone through that experience. And a mentor would be somebody who's found success longer term at the organization from a similar background. And so we've found that approach, it's a little more personal, is more effective than kind of these ERGs, partly because we're pretty geographically distributed and many of our veterans are out in the field. So an ERG is a little more difficult when you've got people across time zones and not kind of at headquarters. But I think that any kind of affinity group or that you're hiring or targeting, making them feel included and inclusive to the organization is the key. And if your organization chooses an ERG to be able to do that, that's great. If they choose something, maybe a little more one-on-one like we do, that's great. But I think really, as long as the aim is inclusiveness and helping those people feel like they are part of the community of your company, not just an employee, that's the differentiator.
It's a great message, Christy. And I only want to interject just because I thought you ended it exactly where you should have, and a terrific response. And we're at the top of the hour. So I want to take a quick minute before we wrap up just to say thank you again to Rich, Christy, Chris, and Mike for your time, your insights, sharing your personal experiences, both as a service member, as a transitioning service member, and as an employer or leader. Thank you so much to Megan Ralston and our team for leading this. And especially thanks to all of you who participated and joined our event today. A lot of great comments in the chat. And again, please connect with me, with Chris, Rich, Christy, and Mike through LinkedIn. Just reach out to us through the Orion website or through the Lineage or Lutron websites. I know we're not all hard to find these days, and we'd love to continue the conversation going forward. So thanks so much, and appreciate everybody's time, and hope you all have a great day and a great rest of your week.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.